Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about my mother's natal chart. Her name was Kathleen M. Learnard, and I just want to talk about her chart today. She was born on November 10th, 1945. She would have been 79 years old today. She passed away, sadly, about 3 years ago on November 29th, 2021. So we're closing in on the 3-year anniversary of her death. So you could say I'm paying like a eulogy and tribute, giving her eulogy and tribute on this day. And I want to talk about some basic things in her chart. First off, again, she was born November 10th, 1945. She had her sun in Scorpio and moon in Capricorn and a Cancer ascendant. So the thing is, looking at her chart, she, sun in Scorpio, naturally, her life was crisis ridden to some degree, basic character, being very passionate, incisive, probing, being able to look deep, go beyond subterfuge, superficiality. She had the moon in Capricorn, which gave an emotional need to attain career ambitions. And the unconscious side of her may have been very ambitious, consistent, structured, disciplined, responsible. It's also a singleton. So, singleton is, as some of you may know, but I'll explain it for some that may not know what that is. A singleton in astrology occurs when a planet, when you have only one planet in a single quality or element. And the moon was her only planet in an earth sign, so it made that a singleton planet. And a singleton in astrology can be more pronounced, prominent, stand out more in the chart. And the moon in Capricorn also, the feelings, can often be sad, melancholy, depressive, but at the same time, again, on the positive side, that unconscious side could have been very ambitious, and very ambitious side to her that she may not have always been aware of. Now, another thing too, having a Cancer ascendant, the outer self is softer than the sun, its basic character, the true self, the sun being in Scorpio, and the outer self being, Cancer ascendant, very nurturing, caring, dedicated, devoted, sympathetic, protective. She was somebody that would often, go beyond means for other people. One time when the people that were living upstairs from us in a two-family home, they had some issue happen, a crisis situation with their baby, and my mom was willing to come along with them, just basically to give them some moral, emotional support. And that was just the kind of person she was, about trying to give and show benevolence and kindness toward others. And she also had Mars conjunct her ascendant in her natal chart, so that flavored that Cancerian ascendant energy, a little bit more combative, assertive, a little more aggressive, than the average Cancer rising person. I can remember one instance when somebody was living again upstairs from us and was making some noise, and my mom went to her door and said, yelled at her and said, why don't you show some consideration. My mom also had her midheaven in Aries, so she was had the reputation, the public image to be a fighter, one that was not afraid of confrontation when necessary, even though she had the Cancer ascendant, which outwardly can be somewhat timid, more passive side. So the thing too is also too, she had Saturn conjunct her ascendant in the 12th house. And the thing is, I have that as well. I have Saturn conjunct my ascendant from the 12th house. And my mom was with that, coupled with having 8 planets on the bottom half of her chart, my mom was somebody, that was, more introverted than extroverted. Saturn in the 12th house can have difficulty letting others, into their life, but it could also indicate, ability to work laboriously in solitude and seclusion. A lot of responsibility toward home and family members, having Saturn being in Cancer. Now, she was, somewhat diminutive and petite in her stature. Saturn on the ascendant, can diminish, the size, of the stature of the person to some degree. She was like 5'3.5", roughly, and on average, her weight was maybe around 105, 110 pounds, during the time, that I really knew her, and I knew her well, in contrast to the latter part of her life, which I really didn't have any contact with her, unfortunately. But the thing is, some other things in her chart, again, she had a preponderance of planets on the bottom half of her chart, which indicates more introversion than extroversion, more about being to oneself as opposed to being gregarious and outgoing, more subjective in contrast to being objective. And also, what I noticed too, one thing, she has a balance of planets on the left and right side of her chart, which can show, equilibrium and balance between self-reliance and dependence. Now, the left side of the chart emphasizes self-reliance and independence. The right side is more about, dependence on others. But the thing is, having that balance of that energy, indicates that she may have been somebody that, knew when, she could do things independently and by herself, but wasn't afraid to ask others for assistance. And also shows, a good balance of energy between doing things on your own and collaborating with others on projects and endeavors as well. Now, another thing too is when I look at her chart, she had the majority of her planets fell in the second quadrant, which consists of houses 4, 5, and 6. And that indicates that there was a strong emphasis on the home, family, the children, and working laboriously, to support them. That's where a lot of that energy could indicate. She did devote a certain amount of time for herself, though naturally she had 3 planets in the first quadrant of her chart. The first quadrant of a natal chart consists of houses 1, 2, and 3. But she didn't have any planets, I noticed, in the third quadrant of her chart, which consists of houses 7, 8, and 9. So, it doesn't mean there's no activities in matters pertaining to those houses, but what it could suggest is that there just wasn't much emphasis, in those matters. 7th house, relationships. 8th house is the intimate connections. The 9th house is foreigners, so it really, wasn't really, so much, or she didn't really accentuate, that energy, that part of her life, And the thing is, she had been married. She had Capricorn at 29 degrees on the cusp of the 7th house, and she did marry, somebody older. And sadly, my father, he had passed away very early, 1974. My father was a Gemini sun, Gemini moon, Virgo rising, and as I've stated, before in previous videos, and I'll say it again, that Gemini and Virgo, often dissipate out of our lives quickly, leave our mundane plane early, because being ruled by Mercury, basically, it's like coming and going like the wind, basically. But anyway, back to my mother's chart. Another thing, about her, chart too, I wanted to get at is that, that she had, the Mercury being in Sagittarius, and that's a very, jovial, jocular side of her. I used to, joke with her, From time to time, it was a very, we had almost more, like a friendship connection, in contrast to an actual family connection. I think a lot of that in our synastry was attributed to my moon in Gemini, conjunct her Uranus. So it was almost like I felt she was more like a friend to me than an actual family member. So, and another thing too, her chart ruler, which is the ruler of the first house, fell in the sixth house. So what that could indicate is that a lot of that Cancerian energy, rising energy, dedicated, devoted, sympathetic, protective, caring, Cancerian rising energy may have been injected into the daily routine, into work, employment, doing things service related, things, any cleaning, anything, sixth house related, and being flavored with that moon, in Capricorn, with a little more ambition, more consistency, and more that single-minded focus, I would say, as well. And her moon, making the opposition to her ascendant, so it just indicates what she would be showing outwardly was completely opposite of what she may have been feeling, because Cancer rising can express a very strong emotional nature outwardly, and the moon in Capricorn can be somewhat restrictive with the emotions, and more rational, more disciplined, a more serious energy, and colder energy too. So you have, the Cancer rising energy, and the ascendant is what, we naturally project outwardly, the qualities and characteristics naturally expressed, a more of an emotional, sympathetic nature, where the moon in Capricorn, an unconscious side, may be more undemonstrative, a little bit more colder. So it's interesting that she had that opposition. And when you have the moon either opposed or square the ascendant in the natal chart, it could indicate difficulty in often expressing those feelings outwardly, as well. So these are, some things to look at with her chart. And, at her, at the time of her passing, what I noticed is she had, the one thing, that really stood out to me is that the transit moon, made a conjunction. Transit Pluto made a conjunction to her natal moon. And when she died, one of the issues was a failure to thrive. And, I don't know if I'm articulating this or stating this precisely or not, but the failure to thrive, I believe, has to do with, it's not about, lack of hunger or anything, or being overly hungry, or not eating, not eating just for the sake of, not eating, not because you just don't want to nourish yourself. I think what failure to thrive has to do with is not having the cognitive ability, the understanding that you need to put food in your mouth to replenish, to assimilate food in order to survive, to understand that you need to take a fork or whatever you need to do, whatever utensil you need to use, the understanding, the lack of understanding to take that food and put in your mouth and eat it and consume it. I think when that failure to thrive hit, she just didn't really have, the comprehension, the cognitive ability to understand that she needed the food in her system in order to survive, and it was very sad. She died in a nursing home. She has one of the rulers of the 8th house of death in the 12th house, which could indicate a death in a nursing home, actually. So I thought that was interesting. And the ruler Saturn is in the zodiac sign Cancer, and it tells me that she likely got very nurturing care from others at the time. That the people did likely do their best to try to prolong her life and take care of her. But when you have that understanding that you need to put food in yourself, in your body, in order to survive, there can be issues, and she had the transit Pluto, again, conjunct her moon at the time, which could indicate a death that may be associated with food. Whether it's the assimilation of it or what have you. It was in her sixth house, or something. There may have been some issues, with her stomach as well. We'll look just momentarily, people, and see what other issues she had. Well, she had, again, the adult failure to thrive, and she also had COPD and the cognitive impairment as well. And the thing about, this also, it says there were other significant conditions contributing to death, but not resulting in the underlying cause given. It says depression, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, pleural effusion, and osteoporosis. So she had, numerous things obviously going on at the time of her death, unfortunately. She died at 76 years old. She lived about average age as far as longevity goes. But there's really not much more I wanted to get at, and again, as I stated before, my mom and I sadly didn't have, an abundance of communication in her latter days. But the one thing I do appreciate with her during the time, when I stayed with her in my younger time when I was growing up in New York, is that I will say, in contrast to the, today's time that I'm in, is that I did have, good, great, conversations with her, and ones that were extensive. It's not like in today's age that I've dealt with people where the communication often is very superficial, or people only want to talk to me when they feel like it. They're very rarely there for me when I need them, or communications with me now can often be very sporadic and erratic and intermittent. I'll be talking with people then, online or something, and all of a sudden things just go dead for a very prolonged time. And back in that time, I will say one thing, and whether it was even with my mom or other people, that I did actually have more regular, discussions and conversations with others. And it's a shame, what we've come to in this day of age, where things have become sadly much more superficial. And people, just don't seem like they want to, talk as much, to others or converse. I'm not really sure, what's happened. I don't know if, maybe the COVID thing had something to do with this, where people began to retreat more and go into isolation, and they just didn't really, get out of that mode to some degree. And also, I think some of it's attributed to being dominated by the social media and internet era, where, people just, they don't really have that feel to have the real significant, meaningful, conversations like maybe we once did. People are less neighborly too, I've noticed. You ever watch, movies or TV shows where you'll see, neighbors, walk up to another person and introduce him or herself. And, the community I've been in for some months now, people are just, you're very aloof and detached. They just kind of, look the other way when I go by. There's really not much of a chance for me to even say hello or wave, because they're not even making effort to really want somebody to say anything to them or to greet them. So it's much more difficult now. And again, it goes, essentially what I'm saying is, I will say my mom and I had our differences, but at least she did give me, a chance with communication, and would talk to me and give me some meaningful and enjoyable moments together. And those days have pretty much been eradicated at this point. For me, there's very few people, if any, are around now that I even have those, times with at this, point in time. And it's just a shame it's come to that. But anyway, I just wanted, again, wish my mom happy heavenly birthday in heaven, happy 79th birthday. And if you could hear me now, Mom, I'll say that I'm sorry that things didn't really work out, the way way it could have been planned. I understand why things were the way they were, and we had to have, to have a separation separation for such a prodigious amount of time. It was very unreasonable, I would say, just to actually say the absolute least. And anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.